Hi, everyone. It's Joe Veneri, the host of Fit Insider, the show where I talk with the entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are redefining the business of fitness and wellness. Today, I'm joined by Tobi Pearce, the CEO of Sweat. Along with his wife, Kayla Itsines, Tobi and the team at Sweat are building the world's largest female fitness community. In this episode, we talked about his journey from personal training to creating a digital fitness platform. We also discussed customer acquisition and retention as it relates to growing Sweat's community. And Tobi shares his thoughts on fitness in a post-COVID-19 world. Let's get into it. Hi, Tobi. Welcome to Fit Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, mate. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk and kind of just jump right in to kick things off. Just tell listeners about what you're building at Sweat, kind of how long you've been at it and where the company stands today.
Sure. So look, at Sweat, we're trying to, our mission is to empower women, with fitness. So we're on a journey to build a platform and build a fitness community of women all over the world, and doing everything we can to try and change their lives. We've been on this journey, which is certainly pivoted and changed many times. But me and my wife, Kayla. She's been a trainer since 2009. I was a trainer since 2011. We built this business, officially online since 2014, and now we're operating as a fitness app, which is sort of 3 or 4 rounds of evolution since we started, and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, it's been a great story and journey to kind of watch from afar. You mentioned your wife, Kayla Itsines, who's built an online following and brand, definitely recognizable. And you talked about a little bit there the evolutions of the business. Just kind of zooming out a little bit, can you talk about where maybe things started and how it's progressed over time?
Sure. I think the shortest version, probably really after spending a fair bit of time just in personal training, boot camps, running gyms. Kayla and I had been together for quite a while and sort of had this pretty solid agreement that that online was going to be a pretty decent thing in the future. And this was sort of around the dawn of Instagram, and so we'd been active on that platform, and people sort of asking for a lot of our content all over the world. And so we actually initially just launched a website and an ebook, or a couple of ebooks for Kayla. And we were fortunate enough to travel the world and run a series of fitness events with a huge portion of our members at the time. And I think the overwhelming feedback really was that they loved what we were doing. But I think that there was this huge desire for flexibility and variety, which is not uncommon. I think that the industry is aware of that as a pretty macro trend. And so we took that upon our shoulders to try and design a solution for that. And from our perspective, it wouldn't have been sort of authentic to do all of the content just with Kayla, because we very much try to stay closely aligned to what our true subject matter expertise is. So we went about partnering with a few other different content providers and trainers from all over the world to provide different content. And that was sort of the dawn of what the business is now, which is Sweat. We launched that organization as a mobile app as opposed to sort of just more ebooks, and we've used that over the last 3-4 years to really build a large online community, of women who are consuming a variety of different fitness content on our platform every day, and loving it.
Yeah, it's great to hear how things evolved somewhat organically. Can you just talk a little bit about when you're going from this, obviously seeing the interest grow, you're moving online, you also had the opportunity to engage with people in person. So you're seeing that, they're very interested in the brand and the content and everything that you're putting out there. How did you go from kind of that moment to saying, oh, it seems so easy, turn it into an app? I'm sure in reality, it wasn't anything like that. So kind of digging into like the business behind the scenes, did you have a vision in mind in terms of a roadmap for what the company could become today? Because it's, highly recognizable. And like you said, users all over the world, but was that the vision, or did it just kind of build one step at a time?
Look, I think if you had asked me 5 years ago, do I think that we would have had a community of over 50 million women around the world who were engaged with that content. I'm not going to lie and say I think I would have thought it would have been that many people in that many countries. Yeah, I think really interesting as we look at our organization, and I guess I'd call us like a product organization. More than I necessarily would a health and fitness business. Like that's our channel to deliver our service. But I think innately being a personal trainer actually gives you an incredible advantage. When entering this product space, and when I say that, what I mean is that a personal trainer inherently is a service provider, and in order to provide their service well, it's actually about collecting a huge amount of feedback from from your client or your clients, and then using that feedback, interpreting it, and then customizing and personalizing the experience to that person at that time, so that they enjoy it the most and get the best results from it in the safest way possible. And so as we ventured around the world running events and speaking with our members, it's in our nature to ask questions. It's in our nature to get feedback. It's in our nature to try and understand like what's actually important to to her. And so I think I guess part one of that, to get really crisp about what it is that she wants and how she wants that delivered and where and when and then why. That was one of the simpler things earlier on. I think the hardest part for us was really, it was pretty obvious that was not in the format of an ebook that we were delivering at that time. It was very obvious that it was something mobile, that it was something to do with video and audio, etc. And we were, while we were right in understanding what the members want, obviously building software was not at all something that we had experienced. And so I think the bigger leap really was actually the leap into software, like more than it was the leap into, is this the right idea? Because I think that we'd derived a fairly decent amount of confidence at that point that she wanted, we understood pretty well.
And there's, I think, a couple parts in there that I want to dig into. You mentioned, obviously the content and the brand focused on providing workouts and health and fitness advice overall to women as the core audience, and then moving into kind of this overall macro trend of delivering it on a mobile device, the flexibility, kind of the on-demand nature of being able to work out whenever and wherever on your own terms. And now as that space is starting to evolve, how are you thinking about delivering those workouts, the content? Is it a matter of expanding into other verticals? What does that roadmap look like for consumers and the content?
Yeah, it's an incredibly interesting time, obviously, given the external environment at the moment, as it relates to the coronavirus pandemic. But I guess how do we deliver that content, and what content do we deliver, and why? Are sort of questions that I think myself and our team ponder quite a lot, quite regularly. I guess maybe if we divide those things up, how do we deliver that content is a changing space, with this sort of evolution of, virtual reality, augmented reality, the improvements to video delivery. Is it streamed video on demand? Is it controllable by the member at the rate that she wants to move? There's obviously all of these variables that we consider. I think almost a more important question though is actually what is the content, and when I say what, I mean what style of training? Is it high intensity, low intensity? Is it with equipment, with heavy weights, or not? And when we get within those categories, and what exercises are we choosing at what frequency and variance, etc. And I think the reason why that's a critical component is that invariably, 100% of the people that come to our platform with a couple of things. And those things are, firstly, they have the absolute best intent to use the platform. They want to do something to improve, their health or their fitness or both. And I think secondly, when we say that they want to improve their health and fitness, they typically, like the majority of them, have a very specific goal in mind. And so then therefore, by virtue of that, the what in the content is incredibly important, because we need to give her content that's actually going to get her what she wants, whether that's how she wants to feel or something she wants to be able to achieve. And so we're really deep in this space at the moment about trying to understand the different styles of training and specifically what goals she has, and then how can we use technology in a really intelligent way to what we say like hyper personalize that experience for her. And it sounds probably kind of almost silly or maybe a little obvious, but personal training is obviously inherently personal. And so if you go to a personal trainer in a gym and have a one-on-one session, you expect that to be wholeheartedly tailored to you. But interestingly, like in the digital space, and whilst technology should certainly be able to permit that, many products that exist on the internet, whether it be web or apps or equivalent, are actually really not personalized. And we're certainly not what we want to be, but we're definitely very conscious of that as a high priority for us.
The idea of personalization is one that comes up a lot, kind of regardless of who the executive is that we're talking to, whether that's an on-demand or app that's accessible to everybody, something that you mentioned, wearables, even looking at some of the connected fitness devices, personalization continues to pop up. Is there a sense beyond, asking the question or thinking about more broadly what it is that your end consumer wants, just how personalization plays out within the Sweat platform?
Sure. At the moment, in its infancy, admittedly, but where we see this, maybe in two separate categories. One, how can we remove barriers to get her to do her first workout? So when we're introducing ourselves to her and we're trying to understand about her and her goals, how can we make sure that we're showing and displaying things to her that are relevant, that actually motivate her to start? Because I think we can all probably understand, as men or as women, from all different walks of life, that if you're beginning your journey, it's incredibly confronting. To actually get to that first workout. Like even in whether it be gyms or apps or personal training, the majority of people who sign up typically don't actually use the product. Gyms are an incredibly long history of data that relates to a huge portion of people that sign up at the beginning of the year that never return. So we're considering how can we use personalization in a way that we onboard and display content to her that's the most relevant, so it's easiest for her to get to her first workout. And I think the second component is then once she actually gets to the workout, whether it be that session itself or future sessions in the future, how can we use personalization to keep her going? And so removing barriers to the activity itself, we can, if she's training in a gym and a particular piece of equipment's not available, how can we recommend to her an alternate exercise? If she's training at home and we've got a workout program, how can we remove the equipment that she doesn't have and customize the program for her so that she'll still get the same benefit, she'll still get the same muscles activated, etc. If she is lifting weights or providing us some sort of input in terms of intensity, rate of physique, exertion, etc., how can we use that to proactively customize the workouts to make them more difficult or easier for her so that she can feel like she's succeeding? Because there's nothing worse than starting a workout or looking at a track record of workouts and feeling like you're not making any progress. And it's our job as personal trainers to make sure that we're coaching the individual to let her actually make progress on her journey. So it's a pretty big picture at the moment, but I think we can quite simply categorize personalization down, to two different attempts. And the first attempt is to get her to her first workout, and the second attempt is to keep her working out once she started.
Yeah, both hugely important, and an area of differentiation, certainly among, as you mentioned, kind of brick and mortar gyms where it's not really important if you come to the gym or if you're working out, just as long as you're paying the membership. Of course, the on-demand and the fitness apps and personalization makes it more customizable, and you start to look at what are these numbers in terms of sessions completed and adherence over time, and are we continuing to improve? All of that certainly playing a role. One other thing I wanted to touch on, if those are differentiating Sweat in the space, how do you continue to acquire new users, reach new members in a time where there's more fitness content being created than ever before, and also kind of social channels that may have been easier or less crowded in the past are starting to become more crowded or more expensive in terms of acquisition costs? How are you approaching acquiring new members?
Yeah. Well, I have a little, probably slightly counterintuitive, philosophy here. And if I'm fully transparent, I don't think it's one that we've nailed yet, where we're certainly working on it. But I think the best acquisition strategy is actually really good retention. And the reason why I say that is because if you retain a lot of people, you need to acquire less. And as you've said, it gets harder and it gets more expensive. Also, if you retain more people, they're typically also happier with the product, so they're telling more people about it. And I think everyone is aware that word of mouth is an incredibly good marketing strategy. It's free and it's incredibly high advocacy and high yield. So, but I think if we really specifically look at acquisition, I think like something that's always been important to us, because it's just the way that we started in our careers, is this notion of community. And whether it be that you look at gyms or boutique equivalents, which I would argue have probably done it best in recent years, or the digital space. Fitness is a social activity, and community as a mechanism supports women and all people in their fitness journey in a variety of manners. And so we believe that really leveraging our community in the long term and creating our own ecosystem for community is probably going to be one of our most powerful acquisition and renewal drivers in the future.
Let's dig into that a little bit. I think community is another thing in addition to personalization that comes up when you talk about fitness and how you retain people over time. In the physical space, when you talk about studios and even personal training, the community element is more tangible, right? You're able to interact with somebody face to face. How do you think about building and maintaining community when it is digital, recognizing how important it is?
Yeah, it's a super fascinating space, and I think as you're right, as you look at sort of the more retail oriented products and services that exist in fitness, the Soul Cycles or the F45s of the world, they've really nailed that like camaraderie, type behavior amongst their users, which obviously drives competitive behavior and stickiness. I think at least sort of maybe more macro perspective. I think there's two key characteristics here that I think that we would probably sort of lean into, and I think one of them is that like camaraderie and competitive nature. And then the second one is sort of the more, what could be generically defined as sort of support or, help and assistance from people in the community. And so I think you're right. Like digitally, they can be slightly more difficult to get moving. But once they do get moving, they do move at the same velocity and they have the same impact on stickiness that, you would otherwise receive in the retail environment. I think a few really good examples of this, and Strava does an incredibly good job of this. They were, sort of one of the pioneers in the space, obviously, specifically within the niche of cycling. But we've probably done an okay job to date in the support area. We have a community forum with hundreds of thousands of active people on there doing very many discussions on a rolling monthly basis. Our social community as well, that's more than 50 million strong, are an incredibly supportive group to one another as well. So we have both sort of on platform and off platform support activities happening. I think the area where we're leaning into now is sort of the the competitive and camaraderie type behavior, which we've seen really positively recently in a program that we ran called Sweat Challenge in January of this year, which is sort of an on-platform challenge that runs for 6 weeks, where people are doing customized workout contents and trying to survive, kind of do all the workouts throughout the program. And from that, like, we had some of our highest reporting feedback because it was a really, really cool, short, sharp, shiny challenge which people were able to engage with on a communal level.
The idea of challenges is certainly one that's important in terms of building community and camaraderie. So I'm sure that it was exciting to see in terms of people engaging with that, and going all the way back to the early days of as Kayla and Sweat are starting to build in terms of notoriety. The idea of that community was so strong. That momentum has certainly helped carry through to this point. I just want to change gears a little bit here. You mentioned it earlier. We're recording this during the COVID-19 outbreak, and that's obviously had ramifications across every part of life. But as it relates to the fitness industry, gyms and studios are closed. Everything's moving to the at-home and on-demand streaming. What type of changes and challenges have you seen at Sweat since this all went into effect?
Yeah. I think you're right. It's been a fascinating time, globally across all industries, and I think, I think at the surface level, perhaps some of the impacts, whether positive or negative, on the fitness industry, on the surface, potentially a little obvious, but there's some interesting, stuff beneath that, and so we founded our organization initially on the sort of anywhere, anytime workout I guess like subcategory. But over the last 3 years, we've definitely evolved into different areas. And interestingly for us, well over a third of our members actually follow gym-based programs. And so when this COVID activity sort of started to really gain momentum, I'd say maybe early March. We obviously, as expected, but quite aggressively saw like a really immediate pivot, away from those programs. Members would migrate from those and dive straight into the at-home activity. We were quite proactive in this regard, and we actually released a significant amount of new content, almost immediately after we saw that trend started to change. So we've got almost 90% of our members are currently like doing at-home programs or programs that effectively equivalently don't really require any sizable equipment. And obviously during this time, because of the I guess perhaps lockdown is the right word. People need fitness that can be accessible and flexible with in some cases not only limited equipment but zero equipment, because some people literally have nothing. I think something that's been quite interesting to watch for us like over the last 5 years is that if you kind of step away from like the generic traditionalist like aerobics or at-home aerobics, there's a culturally a huge portion of people that think that they kind of have this confirmation bias that if you want to get results you have to lift weights, and if you want to get results you've got to go to the gym. But obviously we know, in our space, that's not actually entirely true. And so as there's been kind of this, forced or like mandatory requirement for people to stay at home, as new people have entered and, tried our product, there's been a lot of what we would call the converted, which we've seen like in our reviews and in a lot of our feedback, people saying, I would have never previously worked out at home before, but I'm fascinated at how exciting and enjoyable and great these workouts are. I think that I'll probably actually keep working out from home afterwards. And I think this is an interesting trend to lean into.
Just from a higher level, and maybe even stepping aside from sweat specifically, how do you think about the evolution of the space? The conversation is pretty much centered around a lot of these things were happening, right? The shift to more of at home or convenience, and calling it even omni-channel fitness, anywhere, wherever the user wants to access it, they can. And maybe the virus has accelerated that change, call it a year or 2 or 3. Do you see that, gyms and studios are significantly impacted once things start to come back online? Is this a short-term blip, or is it more, this fundamentally changes things?
Yeah, I think that's as far as the fitness industry and probably several other industries are concerned, I think that's likely the big question, right? Does a single event like this, massively change human behavior? I think if we look at history, if we genericize that question, there's certainly been significant, maybe black swan events or, single like significant impacting events, that have massively changed human behavior, either temporarily or sort of forever. In this particular case, and I think specifically as it relates to the fitness industry, I'm a little unsure and not necessarily at this point in time, be going all in on one way or the other. I think, I think the reality, and as I've described it, I think that the reality is that some people are probably having this realization that, maybe I don't actually need the gym. Maybe I could actually train at home. And so I think there'll certainly be a portion of people that will follow that trend. But at the same time, I think there is always going to be a need for people that want to use equipment and resistance training and who want to train in person with other people as well, because that's also part of human nature. So maybe to summarize, do I think that gyms will no longer be needed after this kind of blows over? No, I certainly do not. Do I think that there might be a slightly accelerated, and more progressive shift towards at home and, as you've described, sort of dynamic omni-channel workouts? Yeah, I think there will. I think there'll be a slight acceleration, but I don't think that by any means it's going to be black and white.
Certainly, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see as that plays out. Pivoting again just a little bit and thinking about the business and the roadmap as you think about the value that you want to add for consumers. and also any type of innovation and new products that might be coming down the pipeline. When you're talking to your team, what are the things that come up that either you're working on or kind of brainstorming in terms of how you can provide the most value and continue to kind of stand out in a crowded landscape?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we touched a little bit on this earlier, about how do we use personalization and data. We also sort of spoke about the community aspect. Like they're two incredibly large levers for us. I think as well. For us, like we're really committed, and I think I follow a pretty simple principle that we really want to make sure that before we diversify too much outside where we are at the moment, that we've actually really perfected is a strong word, but done an incredibly good job at what we do now. And our standards are quite high because we're trying to really genuinely serve a member in the best way possible. And so as we look forward to sort of growth opportunities, like we're one of the largest platforms in our space, but our actual market penetration of the female audience that work out within our specific criteria is gigantic. And so for us, we see that there's a huge opportunity here just in this space, and the use of continued use of personalization and community for us is definitely where we want to lean into.
And just to put some context around that, I know you've mentioned the kind of user base and the broader community is 50 million strong. How big is the team company wide in terms of employees, and just what type of usage? If it's number of sessions or active members, I don't know what numbers you reveal or are comfortable revealing, but kind of painting a picture of what the expansiveness of the member base looks like.
Yeah, sure. So we're an organisation that's headquartered in Australia. We've got two offices over here, one in Adelaide and one in Melbourne, with about 100 employees that are spread across the two, mostly in our head office in Adelaide. We've currently, as mentioned, we've got a very, very large social following. We've got well over 400,000 members at this point in time, operating across a couple of platforms, primarily the Apple and the iOS and Android platforms, as expected. I think in terms of usage, and interestingly, this is been quite heavily impacted by this COVID activity. So normally, our active members are doing just under 10 workouts per month. But over the last, I guess rolling sort of 6 to 8 weeks or so, they've actually been averaging 12 and a half workouts per month, which is, for us, a pretty sizable, pretty meaningful, impact, on the audience. And it's been, really, really fascinating to watch as well and try to understand, what is it that's actually changed that? Why is it that, being sort of closed off indoors is actually making people work out more? What about it is making that happen? But yeah, I mean, that's sort of a quick summary of the organization, mate. That's where we're at today.
And with that, as you think about, you kind of touched on wanting to call it perfect what you have going on now before you grow, and the product and the company evolving more organically over time. If you were to reset right now in this moment and think about everything that you want to accomplish, what does that bigger vision look like from this point going forward?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I sort of really probably vaguely commented earlier, our target state really is to be the world's largest and most supportive fitness community for women on the planet. And so, broadly speaking, at the moment, we really provide a small, what I would say is a small slither of all of the fitness content that she wants to consume. And we definitely don't cover off all those areas. I think for us, we're looking to be that one platform, the one platform that has it all for her. And for, something that we sort of, ramble and rave about internally is, any woman, anywhere, anytime, any workout. That's sort of the direction, I guess, if I had to really summarize it shortly, where we're heading. And so whether that is the use of new technology or new platforms or whatever in the future is kind of redundant in that regard. Our desire is just to be that place for her.
Yeah, it's an incredible vision and an incredible opportunity to be that all-in-one place. As we think about it and wrapping up here, we'll get you out of here on this. Is there anything, as folks now are starting to tune in a little bit more, they're obviously using the platform more and the user base continues to grow. Is there anything in terms of products or new innovations that they should keep an eye out for?
There's certainly a lot of stuff coming. That's for sure. As I mentioned earlier, we recently released a whole bunch more content, but we've sort of in the background, been working on a whole bunch of different product technology to lift personalization, as I mentioned earlier. Some, I hinted around the exercises and workouts, et cetera. So if I was a member listening along, I would be probably impatiently waiting to see over the next sort of 3 to 6 months what drops in that area.
Yeah, I'm sure they're tuned in. And last thing, wrapping up, where can folks get in touch if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so if you want to dive into the platform, on all the social media channels, the user handle is Sweat. Platforms available on iOS, Android, and web. So dive into sweat.com, consume some of our free content, and if you like it, download and have a go.
Listen, Tobi, thanks so much for making time today. It was exciting to chat.
No, likewise, mate. Really, really great to chat. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. For more from Fit Insider, visit insider.fit.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Then go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.